All right, let's get right into it. We're going to talk about a single report from 1996 that pretty much completely changed the game for youth justice in England and Wales. It was called Misspent Youth, and believe me, its impact is still a huge deal today. And this quote, this was the bombshell. This was the verdict from the Audit Commission, which was basically the UK's public spending watchdog. I mean, you can't get much more brutal than that. This wasn't just a simple critique. This was them saying, the whole system is broken. Tear it down. So you might be wondering, just how bad was it really? Well, before this report dropped, the youth justice system was, let's just say, a total mess. And the Audit Commission decided it was time to figure out exactly where all the money was going and what, if anything, it was actually achieving. And we're talking about massive amounts of money here. About £1 billion a year was being pumped into the police, courts, and social services just to deal with youth crime. So the big question the Audit Commission was asking was, is this money being well spent? And their answer was a loud and clear no. Okay, so this is where they really break down the failure. They found a system where nobody was really in charge. You had the police and social services kind of doing their own thing, not talking to each other. It was slow, it was inconsistent, and here's the kicker. It wasn't actually preventing crime. It was just reacting, usually way too late, by throwing a ton of money at putting kids in custody, which just didn't work. But the Misspent Youth report didn't just point out all the problems. It actually offered a bold new blueprint. And this is key. It reframed the entire issue. It wasn't about bad kids. It was about bad public management that could, theoretically, be fixed with a much smarter, more efficient system. And at the absolute heart of this new blueprint was this idea called the risk factor prevention paradigm. Honestly, the idea behind it is pretty straightforward. Instead of just waiting for a crime to happen and then reacting, why not try to identify the risk factors beforehand? You know, things like family issues, trouble at school, neighborhood problems, and then intervene early to stop a young person from ever going down that path in the first place. So, how do you actually do all that? Well, the report laid out these 5 core principles. 1. Make prevention the #1 goal. 2. Target your resources on the young people deemed high risk. 3. Force all the different agencies to finally work together. 4. Speed the whole process up. And 5. Take all that money being wasted on expensive custody and put it into community programs instead. This was the roadmap. Now, the report presented itself as totally objective, data-driven, based on hard evidence. But, and this is a big but, when academics started to dig into it, a very different story started to come out. The Audit Commission was really clear on this. They were like, hey, this isn't just our opinion. They pointed to national statistics, to their economic analysis of that £1 billion, and to existing academic research. And you know what? On the surface, it looked totally legit. But here's the first major crack in the foundation. Critics argued that the way the report used statistics was just way too simple. For example, it would confuse individual charges with individual kids, and it used these broad average costs that just didn't reflect the messy reality of the justice system. The data, they argued, was being bent to tell a particular story, not to find the truth. And you see the exact same thing with its use of research. The report went all in on that risk factor idea to justify its whole target and intervene strategy. But later analysis showed that it basically cherry-picked the studies that backed up its argument, while completely ignoring other research that might have pointed to totally different solutions. And this quote just nails the whole critique. Academics basically concluded that the report wasn't a neutral, technical, numbers-based audit, which is what actuarial means here. No, it was a political document. The evidence wasn't being used to find a solution. It was being used to justify a solution that was already popular with politicians. So you'd think with all these flaws, maybe the report would just sit on a shelf and gather dust, right? Wrong. Its blueprint didn't just get noticed. It became the foundation for a complete overhaul of the law, and the journey from paper to parliament happened incredibly fast. Just look at this timeline. It's wild. The report comes out in '96. Almost immediately, the opposition Labour Party starts echoing its big ideas. The very next year, after they win the election, New Labour releases a policy paper that reads like a direct sequel to the report. And by 1998, just 2 years later, bam, it's all made law in the Crime and Disorder Act. And that act is what made the report's ideas a reality. For the first time ever, the actual legal goal of the youth justice system became preventing offending. It created the youth offending teams, the YOTs, forcing police, social workers, and schools to finally cooperate.
And it brought in this whole culture of performance targets, especially for making cases go faster, just like the report demanded.
So, what's the big picture legacy here? Well, Misspent Youth was incredibly successful at building a consensus. It created this new, modern managerial approach that, it turned out, both of the major political parties could get on board with. This table really shows how that happened. You had the conservative government, who commissioned the report in the first place, loving the focus on efficiency and being tough on repeat offenders. But it was Tony Blair's New Labour that really took the ball and ran with it, adopting the entire framework and turning all that technical language into the actual architecture of the system we have today.
And that right there is the real takeaway. Misspent Youth cemented a fundamental shift. It moved the system away from just reacting to crime and toward actively intervening in the lives of young people, all of it measured and managed by targets and performance scores. It turned youth justice into a kind of science of management.
Which leaves us with one last really crucial question to think about. The story of Misspent Youth shows just how powerful that phrase evidence-based policy can be. But it really forces us to ask, when we build our systems on evidence, whose evidence actually gets to count? And just as importantly, whose gets left behind?